The lunch bell echoed through Jefferson High's corridors like a death knell. Marcus Chun pushed his glasses up his nose and gripped his backpack straps tighter, preparing for the gauntlet that awaited him in the cafeteria. At 17, he stood. Barely 5'6" in a school where height seemed to determine social hierarchy, and his slight frame made him an easy target for those who measured worth in muscle mass. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual chaos of teenage voices, but Marcus could pick out the distinct laughter of Brad Morrison and his crew from across the room. Brad, the linebacker who'd been held back twice, towered over most students at 6'3". His permanent smirk and predatory eyes had been Marcus's nightmare for the past 2 years. Marcus grabbed the tray and shuffled through the lunch line, hoping invisibility might work today. It never did. Well, if it isn't Calculator Boy. Brad's voice boomed behind him, close enough that Marcus could feel his breath. Still pretending you belong here? Marcus kept his eyes forward, focusing on the cafeteria worker slopping mashed potatoes onto his plate. Just trying to eat lunch, Brad. Just trying to eat lunch, Brad, the bully mimicked in a nasally voice. His cronies Tyler Nash and Connor Webb snickered on cue. You know what I think? I think you need to learn some respect. The cafeteria seemed to quiet around them, other students sensing the familiar prelude to violence. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he reached for an apple, his mind racing through possible escape routes. The emergency exit was 30 feet away, but he'd never make it with his backpack weighing him down. Leave me alone, Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise. What was that? Brad stepped closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over Marcus. Did Calculator Boy just tell me what to do? Marcus turned slowly, his dark eyes meeting Brad's pale blue ones. Something flickered in Marcus's gaze, not fear, exactly, but a calculating assessment that lasted only a split second before he looked away. I said, leave me alone. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Brad's face reddened, and his hand shot out to grab Marcus's shoulder, spinning him around completely. The motion sent Marcus's tray flying, mashed potatoes and green beans splattering across the floor in a grotesque abstract painting. Oops, Brad said with mock concern. Looks like Calculator Boy made a mess. Better clean that up. I'm not cleaning anything, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The collective intake of breath from nearby students was audible. Nobody talked back to Brad Morrison. Not twice. Brad's massive hand clamped down on Marcus's wrist with crushing force. See, that's your problem, Chun. You think you're special because you get good grades. But grades don't mean shit when someone's about to break your scrawny little arm. Marcus winced as Brad's grip tightened, feeling the bones in his wrist grinding together. The pain shot up his arm like lightning, but something strange happened instead. Of the usual paralyzing fear, Marcus felt his mind sharpening, analyzing angles and leverage points with mathematical precision. Last chance, Calculator Boy. Clean up your mess or I start squeezing until something snaps. The cafeteria had gone completely silent now, 200 students watching the familiar ritual of humiliation unfold. Teachers were nowhere to be seen. They never were when Brad decided to assert his dominance. Marcus looked down at Brad's massive hand wrapped around his wrist, then back up at the bully's sneering face. His voice, when he spoke, carried a quiet confidence that surprised everyone, including himself. You know what your problem is, Brad. You think size equals strength. But you've never studied physics. Brad's sneer faltered slightly. What the hell are you talking about? Leverage, Marcus said simply. And the fact that you've been doing this the same way for so long, you've become predictable. Before Brad could process the words, Marcus moved. His free hand shot up, fingers finding the specific pressure point where Brad's thumb connected to his wrist. At the same time, Marcus stepped into Brad's space rather than away from it, using the bully's own forward momentum against him. The grip that had seemed unbreakable moments before suddenly loosened as Brad's hand went numb from the pressure point. Manipulation. Marcus twisted his wrist in the one direction Brad couldn't compensate for, breaking free with a motion so smooth. It looked almost choreographed. The speed and precision of the movement left Brad staggering backward, confused and off balance. "How did you?" Brad started, but Marcus was already in motion. The smaller boy grabbed Brad's extended arm, using it as a lever while driving his shoulder into Brad's elbow joint. The physics were simple. Brad's size worked against him here, his own weight and momentum amplifying the pressure. Marcus applied to the hyperextended joint. The sharp crack echoed through the silent cafeteria like a gunshot. Brad's scream of pain and surprise shattered the quiet, a sound of pure shock from someone who'd never experienced being overpowered. He dropped to one knee, clutching his arm as his face went pale with agony and disbelief. "My arm!" he gasped, staring at Marcus with wide, fearful eyes. "You broke my fucking arm!" Marcus stood over him, breathing hard but steady, his glasses slightly askew but his expression calm. "No," he said quietly. "I reversed the energy you were putting into breaking mine. Basic physics for every action. There's an equal and opposite reaction." Tyler and Connor stood frozen, their mouths agape, unsure whether to help their leader or flee from this stranger who'd somehow emerged from beneath calculator. Boy's meek exterior. The spell broke when Brad tried to stand, his face contorting with pain. "You little freak, you're dead. You hear me? Dead." But his threats lacked their usual menace. Clutching his injured arm, he looked smaller somehow, diminished by the reversal of power that had just occurred. "No," Marcus said, adjusting his glasses. With a steady hand, "I think we're done here." He picked up his backpack, stepped around the scattered lunch debris, and walked toward the cafeteria exit. Behind him, the buzz of excited conversation exploded as 200 witnesses tried to process what they'd just seen. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus Chen walked through Jefferson High's hallways without looking over his shoulder. But he knew this was just the beginning. What do you think will happen next? Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. Principal Hendrix's office smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Marcus sat in the hard plastic chair across from the imposing desk, his hands folded calmly in his lap while chaos erupted around him. Brad Morrison writhed in the adjacent chair, his arm in a temporary sling, his face still pale from shock and pain. Assault. Brad's mother, Karen Morrison, shrieked for the third time in 5 minutes. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair quivered with righteous indignation. That little psychopath assaulted my son. I want him arrested. I want him expelled." Marcus's father, Dr. James Chun, sat quietly beside his son, his surgeon's hands resting calmly on his briefcase. His dark eyes observed the proceedings with the same analytical precision Marcus had inherited, missing nothing. "Mrs. Morrison," Principal Hendrix said wearily, rubbing his temples, "we need to establish exactly what happened before we—" "What happened is clear," she interrupted. "That freak broke my Bradley's arm in front of hundreds of witnesses." "The witnesses," Dr. Chun spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions, "seemed to have varying accounts of the incident." He opened his briefcase and withdrew a tablet, scrolling through notes with practiced efficiency. "I've spoken with 12 students who observed the altercation. 7 confirm that your son grabbed Marcus first. 9 confirm that Bradley threatened to break Marcus's arm before any physical contact occurred. All 12 confirm that Marcus acted only after being physically restrained against his will." Mrs. Morrison's face reddened. "My Bradley would never—" "Your Bradley," Dr. Chun continued calmly, "has been documented bullying my son for over 2 years. I have emails to the school administration dating back 18 months requesting intervention, none of which resulted. in meaningful action. Principal Hendricks shifted uncomfortably. The Chun family's documentation was thorough, methodical, and damning. Every incident reported, every request for help ignored, all of it creating a paper trail that painted the school's inaction in stark relief. "Now see here," Mrs. Morrison sputtered. "Boys will be boys. A little roughhousing never hurt anyone. A dislocated elbow requiring surgical intervention hardly qualifies as roughhousing," Dr. Chun replied. "Though I must say, the precision with which the injury was inflicted shows remarkable anatomical knowledge." Marcus glanced at his father, catching the hint of pride beneath the clinical assessment. Dr. Chen had been teaching his son about anatomy and physics since childhood. Never imagining those lessons would be applied in such a dramatic fashion. "You taught him to do this," Mrs. Morrison accused, pointing a manicured finger at Dr. Chun. "You trained your son to be a weapon." "I taught my son to defend himself," Dr. Chun said simply. "After this institution failed to protect him despite repeated warnings about the exact scenario that played out today." The door burst open, and Officer Janet Reyes from the Jefferson Police Department entered, her hand resting casually on her radio. She'd graduated from Jefferson High 15 years earlier and knew the dynamics all too well. "Sorry I'm late," she said, pulling out a notepad. "Had to finish taking statements from the cafeteria witnesses." She looked around the room, her eyes lingering on Brad's sling before settling on Marcus. Quite a story they're telling out there. "Officer Reyes," Mrs. Morrison began, "I want that boy arrested for assault." "Well, that's interesting," Officer Reyes said, flipping through her notes. "Because based on the statements I've collected, your son initiated physical contact by grabbing the victim's wrist with sufficient force to cause visible bruising. The victim then used what appears to be a defensive maneuver to escape and neutralize the threat." She looked directly at Marcus. "Son, where did you learn that technique?" "Aikido principles," Marcus answered quietly, "using an attacker's energy against them. My father thought it might be useful given my ... situation here." "Smart man," Officer Reyes nodded approvingly. "Classic self-defense. Used only the force necessary to stop the attack and escape further harm. But he broke Bradley's arm." Mrs. Morrison protested. "Your son was attempting to break his arm first," Officer Reyes pointed out. "According to multiple witnesses, Bradley." Morrison explicitly threatened to break Marcus Chun's arm while physically restraining him against his will. "That's assault with intent to cause bodily harm." Marcus's response was proportional self-defense. The color drained from Mrs. Morrison's face as the legal implications became clear. "Principal Hendricks cleared his throat nervously. "So what happens now?" Officer Reyes closed her notepad. "Based on the evidence and witness statements, no charges will be filed against Marcus Chen. His actions constitute clear self-defense against an ongoing assault." She turned to Brad, who'd been unusually quiet during the proceedings. "However, we'll need to discuss the pattern of bullying behavior that led to this incident. This is ridiculous." Mrs. Morrison stood abruptly. "My son is the victim here." "Your son," Dr. Chun said calmly, "is lucky Marcus chose a defensive technique that simply dislocated his elbow rather than something that would have caused permanent damage. My son showed remarkable restraint. The unspoken implication hung in the air. Marcus could have done much worse." Brad finally spoke, his voice smaller than usual. I want to go home." For the first time since entering the office, he looked directly at Marcus. The usual swagger was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "We'll need to schedule a disciplinary hearing regarding the bullying incidents," Principal Hendricks said reluctantly, "and implement new anti-bullying protocols." 2 years too late," Dr. Chun observed. "But perhaps other students will benefit from the school's newfound commitment to safety." As they prepared to leave, Officer Reyes pulled Marcus aside. "Son, what you did today took courage, but be careful. Bullies like Morrison don't usually learn their lesson the first time. They tend to escalate." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, but I'm not afraid anymore." "Good," she said. "Fear can be paralyzing. But don't let confidence become overconfidence. Stay smart." Walking out of the school with his father, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. The hallways that had been a minefield of anxiety were just hallways now. Students watched him pass with newfound respect, whispering among themselves about the quiet kid who'd taken down the biggest bully in school. "I'm proud of you," Dr. Chun said as they reached the car. "Not just for defending yourself, but for showing restraint. You could have seriously injured him." "I thought about it," Marcus admitted. "For a split second, I calculated exactly how much force it would take to snap his wrist completely, but that would have made me no better than him." Dr. Chun smiled. "That's the difference between strength and violence, son. Strength knows when to stop." As they drove home, Marcus allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, his nightmare at Jefferson High was finally over. He was wrong. 3 days after the cafeteria incident, Marcus discovered that defeating one bully was like cutting off a hydra's head. 2 more appeared to take its place. The difference was these new predators were smarter, more careful, and infinitely more dangerous. He first noticed the surveillance during chemistry class. Jake Brennan, a senior with arms like tree trunks and a reputation for underground fighting, kept glancing in Marcus's direction with calculating eyes. At lunch, Marcus spotted Tommy Rodriguez whispering to a group of football players while pointing toward his table. Even more unsettling, Chloe Vance, Brad's ex-girlfriend and the queen bee of Jefferson High's social hierarchy, had started paying attention to him with the kind of predatory interest usually reserved for wounded prey. "You're being paranoid," his best friend David Kim said as they walked to 6th period. David was the only person who'd stuck by Marcus through the years of bullying, largely because his family's wealth made him useful to the social elites. "Brad's got a broken arm. His crew scattered. You won. End of story." Marcus shook his head, his analytical mind picking up patterns others missed. "It's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. Look around, David. Really look." David followed Marcus's gaze across the hallway, where Tommy Rodriguez was deep in conversation with Jake Brennan near the lockers. Both boys glanced toward Marcus before resuming their hushed discussion. "Okay, that's weird," David admitted. "But what are you thinking? That they're planning some kind of revenge?" "I'm thinking they're recruiting," Marcus said quietly. Brad was a blunt instrument, all muscle, no strategy. "These guys are different. They're studying me, looking for weaknesses, planning something more sophisticated than a cafeteria beatdown." As if to prove his point, Chloe Vance appeared beside them, with the fluid grace of a practiced manipulator. Her strawberry blonde hair caught the hallway light perfectly, and her smile was warm enough to melt glaciers or hide daggers. "Marcus Chun," she said, her voice carrying just the right mix of admiration and surprise. "I've been hoping to run into you." David's mouth fell open slightly. Chloe Vance didn't talk to people like them. She existed in a different stratosphere of high school society, surrounded by athletes and trust fund kids who treated the rest of the student body like background noise. "Have you?" Marcus replied carefully, his tone neutral. "What you did to Brad was impressive," she continued, stepping closer. "I had no idea you were so capable. So strong." Warning bells chimed in Marcus's head. Chloe's interest felt wrong, manufactured. Her body language was too perfect, too calculated. Everything about the interaction screamed setup. "Just defending myself," he said simply. "Well, you've certainly made an impression." Her hand brushed his arm lightly, a gesture that sent several nearby students into shocked whispers. "I was wondering if you'd like to come to my party this Saturday. It's going to be quite the gathering. David made a strangled noise that might have been excitement or terror. An invitation to a Chloe Vance party was like receiving a golden ticket to Willy Wonka's factory, unprecedented and potentially dangerous. Marcus studied her face, noting the micro-expressions that betrayed the performance beneath the perfect facade. Thanks, but I'm not really a party person. Oh, come on, she pressed, her smile never wavering. It'll be fun, just the cool kids, you know. People who appreciate ... unique talents. The emphasis on unique talents confirmed Marcus's suspicions. This wasn't an invitation, it was a trap. I'll think about it, he said finally. Great, Chloe's smile brightened, but Marcus caught the flash of satisfaction in her eyes. I'll text you the details. She glided away, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and impending danger. Dude, David whispered urgently, Chloe Vance just invited you to her party. Do you understand what this means? It means I'm about to become the guest of honor at my own execution, Marcus replied grimly. What are you talking about? This is your chance too. Break into the popular crowd. After years of being invisible, you're finally getting recognition. Marcus appreciated David's optimism, but his friend's naivety could be dangerous. David, think about it logically. Why would the most popular girl in school suddenly be interested in the kid who just humiliated her ex-boyfriend? What's her motivation? David's expression slowly shifted from excitement to concern. You think she's working with them? I think she's orchestrating them. The rest of the day confirmed Marcus's growing unease. During English class, he noticed Jake Brennan taking notes, not during the lesson, but while watching Marcus. In the hallway between periods, Tommy Rodriguez accidentally bumped into him, using the contact to assess Marcus's reflexes and balance. Even more concerning, several underclassmen who'd never paid him any attention before were suddenly aware of his presence, watching with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for gladiatorial combat. After school, Marcus walked to his father's medical practice instead of taking the bus, needing time to think and plan. The 3-mile walk through Jefferson's tree-lined streets gave him space to process the developing situation. Dr. Chen's office occupied the ground floor of a renovated Victorian house, its waiting room filled with the kind of calming earth tones designed to soothe anxious patients. Marcus found his father reviewing X-rays in the consultation room, his trained eyes identifying fractures and injuries with the same precision Marcus used to analyze social dynamics. How was school? Dr. Chen asked without looking up from the films. Complicated, Marcus replied, settling into the chair across from his father's desk. I think I've graduated from individual bullies to organized conspiracies. That got his father's attention. Dr. Chen set down the X-rays and focused entirely on his son, his expression shifting into the serious mode Marcus recognized from medical emergencies. Tell me. Marcus explained the day's events from Jake Brennan's surveillance to Chloe Vance's suspicious invitation. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions that helped Marcus organize his thoughts. So they're moving from brute force to psychological warfare, Dr. Chen summarized when Marcus finished. Using social dynamics as a weapon, that's my assessment. The party invitation is obviously a setup, but I can't figure out the endgame. Are they planning another physical confrontation? Public humiliation? Something else entirely? Dr. Chen leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he considered the problem. In surgery, when we encounter an unexpected complication, we don't panic. We gather information, assess our resources, and adapt our strategy. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you might consider accepting the invitation. Marcus stared at his father in surprise. That seems ... counterproductive. Think about it strategically, Dr. Chen continued. Right now, you're operating with incomplete information. You know they're planning something, but not what. Going to the party puts you in their territory, yes, but it also gives you the opportunity to gather intelligence and potentially disrupt their plans before they can be executed. That's assuming I can get out again. That's assuming you go in unprepared. Dr. Chun opened his desk drawer and withdrew a small device that looked like a car key fob. GPS tracker with panic button. One press sends your location to my phone and automatically dials 911. Range is 5 miles. Battery life is 48 hours. Marcus examined the device, impressed by his father's forethought. You've been planning for this. I've been planning for escalation since the moment you broke that boy's arm. Bullies rarely accept defeat gracefully, and the smart ones adapt their tactics. Dr. Chun's expression grew serious. But Marcus, if you do this, you need to understand the risks. These aren't children playing games anymore. You've elevated the stakes, and they're responding accordingly. I know. Marcus pocketed the GPS device. But running won't solve anything. They'll just keep escalating until they corner me somewhere. I can't escape. Then we make sure you're ready for whatever they have planned. Dr. Chun stood and moved to a filing cabinet, withdrawing a manila folder thick with documents and photographs. I've been researching your new admirers. Jake Brennan has been arrested twice for assault charges, dropped both times thanks to his family's connections. Tommy Rodriguez runs an underground betting ring that specializes in organized fights. And Chloe Vance. He handed Marcus a photograph showing Chloe at what appeared to be a house party, her arm around a young man whose face was a mass of bruises. She has a pattern of dating boys who subsequently end up hospitalized under mysterious circumstances. 3 boyfriends in 2 years, all of whom suffered accidents shortly after their relationships ended. Marcus studied the photograph, his analytical mind processing the implications. She's not just popular, she's dangerous, extremely. And now you're in her crosshairs. The weight of the situation settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. He'd thought breaking Brad's arm would end his problems, but instead, he'd attracted the attention of predators far more sophisticated than a simple school bully. So what do? Dr. Chun smiled grimly. We prepare for war. The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. The Chun family's basement had been transformed into something between a dojo and a laboratory. Thick mats covered the concrete floor, while whiteboards lined the walls, covered with diagrams of pressure points, leverage angles, and what looked like architectural blueprints. Marcus stood in the center of the space, sweat beading on his forehead as his father circled him like a predator studying prey. Again, Dr. Chun commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to high-stakes situations. Marcus reset his stance, focusing on the lesson his father had been drilling into him for the past 2 hours. It wasn't enough to know how to defend against one attacker. If Chloe's party was indeed a trap, he'd likely face multiple opponents with varying skill levels and attack patterns. Dr. Chun moved without warning, his surgical trained hand striking toward Marcus's throat. With controlled precision, Marcus ducked left, grabbed his father's extended arm, and used a hip throw to send the older man tumbling onto the mats. But instead of staying down, Dr. Chun rolled smoothly to his feet and immediately launched a second attack from an unexpected angle. This time Marcus was ready. He sidestepped the advance, used his father's momentum to spin him around, and applied a chokehold that would have rendered most people unconscious in seconds. Dr. Chun tapped out, and Marcus immediately released the hold. Better, Dr. Chun said, rubbing his neck appreciatively. You're starting to think 3 moves ahead instead of just reacting to the immediate threat. It feels wrong, Marcus admitted, shaking out his hands. All of this, I just wanted to be left alone. I know. Dr. Chun handed his son a towel and a bottle of water. But wanting to be left alone and being able to ensure you're left alone are 2 different things. Sometimes violence finds us whether we seek it or not. Marcus wiped the sweat from his face, his mind churning with doubts. What if I'm wrong? What if Chloe's invitation is genuine, and I'm just being paranoid? Then you'll have learned valuable skills and made a new friend, Dr. Chun replied pragmatically. But if you're right and you're unprepared. He gestured toward the photographs pinned to one of the whiteboard's images of Chloe's previous boyfriends, all sporting injuries that the hospital records had classified as accidental. Marcus studied the photos again, his analytical mind cataloging the patterns. Broken ribs, dislocated shoulders, facial fractures, all consistent with organized beatings, designed to cause maximum pain while avoiding life-threatening damage. How? Do you know so much about fighting? Marcus asked suddenly. I mean, you're a surgeon. When did you learn all this? Dr. Chun was quiet for a long moment, his expression distant. When I was your age, I lived in a neighborhood where knowing how to defend yourself wasn't optional. My parents had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a belief that education would save their children from violence. He moved to a storage cabinet and withdrew what appeared to be a simple black belt, worn smooth with age. They were half right. Education saved me from a life of violence, but it didn't protect me from violence when violence came looking for me. Marcus had never heard this story. His father rarely spoke about his childhood, preferring to focus on the present and future rather than dwelling on the past. What happened? Groups of older boys who thought immigrants were taking jobs from real Americans. Sound familiar? Dr. Chun's smile was grim. They cornered me one night after my shift at a restaurant where I worked to help pay for college. 5 against 1, all of them bigger and older. But you survived. I survived because my uncle had taught me that strength isn't about size or numbers. It's about understanding your opponents better than they understand themselves. Dr. Chun fingered the old belt thoughtfully. Every bully has weaknesses. Marcus, physical, psychological, tactical. The key is learning to identify and exploit those weaknesses before they can exploit yours. Marcus felt a new understanding of his father settling into place. The calm competence, the methodical approach to problems, the way he seemed to anticipate threats before they materialized, it all made sense now. So what are their weaknesses? Dr. Chun moved to the whiteboards, pointing to different photos and diagrams. Jake Brennan is left-handed but favors his right side due to an old football injury. In close combat, he'll instinctively protect his weak side, creating openings on his strong side. Tommy Rodriguez has excellent reach but poor balance. He's top-heavy, from weightlifting without corresponding leg development. And Chloe? Chloe's weakness is her need for control. She orchestrates events but rarely participates directly, which means she'll position herself where she can observe and direct, but not where she can be immediately threatened. Dr. Chun tapped a floor plan of the Vance family's house that he'd somehow acquired. Based on the layout and her previous parties, she likely positioned herself on the second-floor balcony overlooking the main party area. Marcus stared at the blueprints, impressed by his father's thoroughness. How did you get these? Public records. The Vance family had extensive renovations done last year, all of which required building permits and architectural plans filed with the city. Dr. Chun pointed to various rooms and exits. 3 ways in, 4 ways out, multiple blind spots where attacks could occur without witnesses. You really think they're planning to hurt me? I think they're planning to hurt you badly enough too. Ensure you never challenge their authority again, Dr. Chun said grimly. But more than that, I think they're planning to make an example of you. Public humiliation, followed by private retribution. The weight of the situation pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. Part of him wanted to simply not go to the party, to avoid the confrontation entirely. But he knew that running would only delay the inevitable, if not at the party, then somewhere else, sometime when he was less prepared. Okay, he said finally. What's the plan? Dr. Chun smiled and For the first time, Marcus saw something predatory in his father's expression. The plan is to turn their trap into your advantage. He moved to a different whiteboard covered with what looked like a tactical operations diagram. They're expecting the same scared kid who's been running from bullies for 2 years. Instead, they're going to encounter someone who understands the game better than they do. What do you mean? They've made several assumptions about you, Marcus. They assume you're isolated, no allies, no backup plan. They assume you're reactive, that you'll respond to their moves instead of making your own. And they assume that, because you're physically smaller, you're tactically inferior. Dr. Chen began outlining the strategy with the precision of a general planning a military operation. We're going to let them maintain those assumptions right up until the moment we prove them wrong. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Marcus would attend the party as expected, but he wouldn't be the vulnerable target they anticipated. Instead, he'd be the tip of a spear designed to shatter their carefully constructed trap. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked when his father finished explaining the details. "I'm sure that doing nothing guarantees failure," Dr. Chen replied. "This way, at least we control some of the variables." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind already running through potential scenarios and contingencies. The scared, bullied kid who'd walked into the cafeteria 3 days ago was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the only way to end a war was to win it decisively. "When do we start?" Dr. Chen checked his watch. "The party is in 18 hours. That gives us enough time to run through the scenarios once more and prepare the equipment." "Equipment?" His father's smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Marcus, did you really think I'd send you into a potential ambush with nothing but martial arts training and a GPS tracker?" Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel electric with possibility or danger. Marcus stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his black button-down shirt and checking that his equipment was properly concealed. To any observer, he looked like a nervous teenager getting ready for his first real party. The reality was considerably more complex. The GPS tracker was clipped inside his left pocket, its panic button easily accessible. A small audio recording device, legal in their state for self-defense purposes, was sewn into his shirt collar. Most importantly, a modified pen that contained a fast-acting sedative lay clipped to his chest pocket, looking innocuous while providing a non-lethal option for disabling attackers. "Remember," Dr. Chen said from the doorway, "the goal isn't to hurt anyone if you can avoid it. It's to escape with evidence of their intentions. And if I can't avoid it," Dr. Chen's expression was grave, "then you do whatever is necessary to come home safe." The Vance mansion sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn in Jefferson's most exclusive neighborhood. Its neo-Georgian architecture designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. Music and laughter drifted from the brightly lit windows, creating the illusion of innocent teenage celebration. Marcus knew better. He parked his father's sedan 2 blocks away and walked to the party, using the time to observe the scene and identify potential threats. Jake Brennan's motorcycle was parked prominently in the circular driveway, a message that the guest of honor had arrived. Tommy Rodriguez's lifted truck occupied a strategic position near the back exit, blocking easy escape routes. The front door was answered by Chloe herself, resplendent in a silk dress that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly food budget. Her smile was dazzling and predatory. "Marcus, I'm so glad you came." She leaned in for a hug that lasted just long enough to confirm she wasn't wearing a wire or carrying any obvious weapons. Come in, everyone's dying to meet you." The phrase "dying to meet you" carried ominous undertones, but Marcus smiled politely and allowed himself to be led into the lion's den. The party was exactly what he'd expected. 24 of Jefferson High's elite students clustered in small groups, expensive clothes and casual cruelty on full display. But Marcus's trained eye picked up details others would miss. The way conversation stopped when he entered, the positioning of key players. To block exit routes, the subtle signals passed between members of what was clearly a coordinated group. Drink? Chloe offered, gesturing toward a table laden with beer bottles and red Solo cups. Thanks, but I'm driving, Marcus replied, his paranoia justified when he noticed Jake Brennan's satisfied smirk at the refusal. Whatever they had planned, it required him to be impaired or distracted. Oh, come on, Chloe pressed, moving closer. One beer won't hurt. Live a little. I'm fine, really. The pressure was subtle but persistent, with multiple party guests offering drinks and seeming genuinely confused by his polite refusals. Marcus began to understand the psychology at work. They were normalizing behavior that would make him vulnerable, creating social pressure to comply with their agenda. You know what? Chloe said after 20 minutes of failed drink offers. Let me show you around the house. It's got some amazing architecture. Here it comes, Marcus thought, activating the recording device with a subtle gesture. The tour would take him away from witnesses and into whatever trap they'd prepared. They climbed the ornate staircase to the second floor, Chloe keeping up a stream of seemingly innocent chatter about room renovations and family history. But Marcus noticed the way she positioned herself to block his retreat, and how Jake Brennan had casually followed them upstairs, maintaining a distance that seemed coincidental to anyone not watching for it. This is my favorite room, Chloe said, opening a door to reveal what appeared to be a library or study. Rich mahogany shelves lined the walls, and expensive leather furniture created an atmosphere of scholarly sophistication. My dad's collection of first editions. Some of them are worth more than most people's cars. Marcus stepped carefully into the room, his senses on high alert. The layout was exactly as his father's blueprints had indicated: one entrance, no secondary exits, perfect for containing someone who needed to be contained. Beautiful, he said honestly, though his attention was focused on the tactical situation rather than the literary treasures. I thought you'd appreciate it, Chloe said, closing the door behind them with a soft click. Being such a smart guy. And all. The lock turning was barely audible, but Marcus's enhanced awareness caught it. He was now trapped in a room with a predator who just revealed her intentions. You know, Chloe continued, moving to stand between Marcus and the door, when I first heard about what you did to Brad, I was impressed. Angry, sure, he was my boyfriend, after all, but impressed. It takes real balls to stand up to someone like that. It was self-defense, Marcus replied carefully, noting how her body language had shifted from flirtatious to threatening. Oh, I know exactly what it was. Her smile became sharp as broken glass. It was a declaration of war. A little nobody deciding he was tired of knowing his place. Footsteps in the hallway outside confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Multiple people moving into position, surrounding the room. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and exactly where they wanted him. The thing is, Chloe said, beginning to pace like a predator circling prey, when someone disrupts the natural order, there have to be consequences. People need to understand that actions have reactions. Is that what this is about? Maintaining the natural order? Smart and insightful. She clapped her hands in mock appreciation. Yes, Marcus, that's exactly what this is about. You see, Brad was my enforcer. Crude, perhaps, but effective. When someone stepped out of line, Brad reminded them why the line existed. Marcus processed this information, understanding finally dawning. Brad wasn't just a bully, he was Chloe's weapon, her method of maintaining control over Jefferson High's social hierarchy. By defeating Brad, Marcus hadn't just defended himself. He'd attacked the foundation of her power structure. And now you need to make an example of me, he said. Exactly. Her eyes lit up with genuine pleasure at his understanding. You're going to learn what happens to people who challenge the system, and everyone else is going to watch you learn it. A knock on the door interrupted her monologue. "Chloe, we're ready out here. Perfect timing," she said, moving toward the door. "Marcus, I want you to know this isn't personal." "Well, actually, it is personal because you embarrassed someone I cared about, but it's also business. Can't have the inmates thinking they can run the asylum." She opened the door to reveal Jake Brennan, Tommy Rodriguez, and 3 other boys, Marcus, recognized as members of the football team's offensive line. Each of them looked excited about what was to come. "Gentlemen," Chloe announced, "meet our guest of honor." Marcus stood calmly in the center of the room, his hands relaxed at his sides, his expression surprisingly peaceful for someone facing imminent violence. "Before we start," he said quietly, "I have a question." "Oh, this should be good," Jake sneered, cracking his knuckles. "Calculator boy wants to negotiate." "Not negotiate," Marcus replied. "I just want to understand the rules. Are you planning to kill me, or just maim me?" The question caught them off guard. They'd expected begging, threats, or panic, not a calm inquiry about the parameters of their assault. "Nobody's going to die," Tommy said, though his tone suggested the distinction was relatively minor. "We're just going to make sure you understand your place in the food chain. Multiple broken bones," Jake added helpfully. "Maybe some internal injuries. Enough to put you in the hospital for a few weeks and make you think twice about playing." "Hero again. I see," Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "So assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. That's 7 to 10 years if you're tried as an adult." "Nobody's going to trial," Chloe said confidently. "You're going to tell everyone this was an accident. That you fell down some stairs or crashed your bike or something equally believable. And if I don't?" Her smile was ice cold. "Then the next. Time won't be just broken bones." Marcus appeared to consider this, his head tilted as if weighing options. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "You know what your problem is?" he said conversationally. "You've made the same mistake Brad made." "What mistake is that?" Jake demanded, stepping forward aggressively. "You think you understand me?" Marcus moved. His hand went to his chest pocket, withdrawing the modified pen with fluid grace. But instead of using it as a weapon, he clicked it once and tossed it gently toward the center of the room. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Jake lunged forward to intercept what he assumed was some kind of weapon, while Tommy instinctively stepped back. The football players, confused by the unexpected movement, hesitated just long enough for Marcus to exploit the confusion. But the pen wasn't a weapon, it was a distraction. While everyone's attention focused on the harmless writing instrument, Marcus had activated the GPS tracker's panic button and begun his real plan. Instead of trying to fight his way through 5 attackers, Marcus did something they never expected. He went up. The room's high ceiling was supported by decorative wooden beams, and the tall bookshelf provided perfect stepping stones for someone with the right combination of agility and desperation. Marcus leaped onto the nearest shelf, using his momentum to reach the beam structure 12 feet above their heads. "What the hell?" Tommy shouted, staring upward as Marcus perched above them like a particularly agile gargoyle. "Physics," Marcus called down calmly. "You have superior numbers and strength, but terrible positioning. From up here, I control the engagement. Get down here, you freak." Jake roared, beginning to climb the bookshelf. That's when Marcus revealed the pen's true purpose. The device he'd thrown contained a miniaturized smoke bomb, perfectly legal for self-defense and incredibly effective in a closed room. Thick, choking smoke began billowing from the small cylinder, filling the space and reducing visibility to near zero. The attackers began coughing and stumbling, their careful coordination dissolving into chaos. Jake, halfway up the bookshelf, lost his grip and crashed to the floor. Tommy blundered into one of the football players, sending them both tumbling into a reading chair. Marcus, meanwhile, had wrapped his shirt around his nose and mouth and was using his elevated position to navigate toward the door. The smoke wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to. Help was already on the way. "You little bastard!" Chloe screamed from somewhere in the gray haze. "When I get my hands on you." Her threat was interrupted by the sound of sirens approaching rapidly. Multiple vehicles, getting closer by the second. "Sounds like the party's over," Marcus called down, dropping lightly to the floor near the door. "But don't worry, I'm sure everyone will have a great time explaining to the police why 5 high school students were attacking one in a locked room." The smoke was beginning to clear, revealing the chaos Marcus had created. Jake Brennan sat on the floor holding his shoulder, which had been dislocated in his fall from the bookshelf. Tommy Rodriguez and 2 of the football players were tangled together, sporting various minor injuries from their collision. The 3rd football player stood against the far wall, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Only Chloe remained uninjured, though her perfect appearance was ruined by smoke residue and fury. "This isn't over," she snarled. "Actually," Marcus said, producing the small recording device from his collar, "it is. Everything you just said about maintaining social order through violence, about planning to put me in the hospital, about threatening to kill me if I reported you, all of it. Recorded." The color drained from her face as the implications became clear. That's illegal." "It's legal for recording evidence of planned violent crimes," Marcus corrected. Which is exactly what this was. The front door of the house burst open downstairs, followed by heavy footsteps and shouted commands. Dr. Chun's voice could be heard, giving directions to what sounded like multiple police officers. "Marcus, are you safe?" "I'm fine, Dad." Marcus called back, "Second floor, last room on the right." Within moments, the library was filled with uniformed officers, paramedics, and one very relieved father. Officer Reyes took in the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen too many variations of teenage violence. "Well," she said dryly, "this is certainly an interesting party." The Jefferson Police Department's interview room smelled like instant coffee and fluorescent lighting. Marcus sat across from Officer Reyes, the recording device between them on the scarred metal table, its damning contents having been played 3 times already. "So let me make sure I understand this," Officer Reyes said, reviewing her notes. "You attended a party where you suspected you might be attacked. You brought recording equipment and a self-defense device, and when 5 people attempted to assault you in a locked room, you used smoke and superior positioning to escape while gathering evidence of their criminal conspiracy." "That's accurate," Marcus confirmed. "And at no point did you actually assault any of your attackers?" Jake Brennan's shoulder was dislocated when he fell from the bookshelf, but that was his choice to climb it. "I never touched him." Officer Reyes shook her head in what might have been admiration or disbelief. "Son, in 20 years of police work, I've never seen a teenager turn a 5-on-1 ambush into a controlled evidence-gathering operation." Through the interview room's one-way mirror, Marcus could see his father speaking with Detective Morrison, no relation to Brad. Despite the unfortunate name coincidence, Dr. Chun's calm competence had taken charge of the situation from the moment he'd arrived at the Vance mansion with police backup, transforming chaos into orderly procedure. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we process the evidence and file charges," Officer Reyes replied. "Based on the recording and physical evidence, we're looking at conspiracy to commit assault, false imprisonment, criminal intimidation, and probably a few other charges the DI will think of." She closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. "Marcus, I have to ask, how did you know to bring recording equipment? How did you know they were planning to hurt you?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "My father taught me to think systematically about problems. When Chloe Vance suddenly showed interest in me after I humiliated her boyfriend, the statistical probability of genuine friendship was essentially 0. That meant her invitation served another purpose. So you set a trap for their trap." "I gathered evidence while protecting myself from a credible threat," Marcus corrected. "Everything I did was legal self-defense." Officer Reyes smiled. Kid, you're going to make an excellent lawyer someday. The interview concluded 40 minutes later, with Marcus providing a detailed statement that would form the backbone of the prosecution's case. As they left the police station, Dr. Chun's expression was a mixture of pride and concern. "How do you feel?" he asked as they drove through Jefferson's quiet streets. "Tired," Marcus admitted, "and relieved, but also..." "Also what?" "Also angry that it had to come to this. I didn't want to be someone who sets traps and manipulates situations. I just wanted to be left alone." Dr. Chun was quiet for several blocks before responding. "Sometimes the world doesn't give us the choice to remain innocent, Marcus. Sometimes survival requires us to become harder than we wanted to be. Is that what happened to you when you were my age?" "That's exactly what happened to me. And while I wouldn't wish it on anyone, I can't say I regret learning those lessons. They've served me well in life." They pulled into their driveway as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost mockingly peaceful after the evening's violence. "What happens at school on Monday?" Marcus asked. "That," Dr. Chun said with a grim smile, "depends entirely on how the news spreads." Monday morning at Jefferson High felt like walking into an alternate universe. Marcus arrived to find clusters of students whispering excitedly, their conversations stopping abruptly when they noticed him approaching. But instead of the usual mixture of pity and contempt, their expressions showed something Marcus had never experienced before: respect. Story had spread through the teenage grapevine with the speed of digital wildfire. By Saturday night, everyone knew that Marcus Chun had single-handedly dismantled the most powerful social clique in school using nothing but intelligence, preparation, and superior tactics. The details grew more dramatic with each retelling. But the core truth remained: the quiet kid everyone had underestimated had outmaneuvered 5 attackers and gotten them all arrested. "Dude," David Kim said, appearing at Marcus's locker with eyes wide with excitement, "you're like a legend now. People are calling you the mastermind." "That's ridiculous," Marcus replied, though he couldn't help feeling a small thrill at the nickname. "Ridiculous? Marcus, you just took down Chloe Vance's entire operation. Half the school is terrified of you, and the other half wants to be your friend." As if to prove David's point, a sophomore girl Marcus didn't recognize approached nervously. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you Marcus Chun?" "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you. Chloe's crew made my life hell last year, and knowing they can't hurt people anymore ... double quotes. She smiled gratefully. "It means a lot." She hurried away before Marcus could respond, leaving him staring after her in confusion. "See?" David said. "Legend status." But Marcus was learning that legend status came with its own complications. As they walked to first period, he noticed the way other students moved aside to let him pass, not out of fear, exactly, but out of a kind of nervous respect that felt almost as isolating as being bullied. "Marcus." A familiar voice called from behind them. They turned to see Sarah Martinez, the student body president and one of the few genuinely popular kids who'd never participated in the bullying hierarchy. She approached with her usual confident stride, though Marcus detected something different in her manner. "I heard about what happened Saturday," she said without preamble. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Marcus replied automatically. "Good, because I wanted to talk to you about something." She glanced around at the other students, pretending not to eavesdrop. Privately, they found an empty classroom, and Sarah closed the door behind them. "Look," she said, "I know we've never really talked before, and I'm sorry about that. I should have done something about the bullying situation earlier. It's not your responsibility to protect everyone," Marcus said, though. He appreciated the sentiment. "Maybe not, but it is my responsibility to make this school better for everyone. And what you did Saturday, exposing how toxic that whole social structure really was, it's given us an opportunity to change things." Marcus studied her face, looking for hidden agendas or manipulation. But Sarah's expression was earnest, her body language open and genuine. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'd consider running for vice president. Elections are next month, and we need someone who understands how to stand up to bullies and protect the students who can't protect themselves." The suggestion caught Marcus completely off guard. "I'm not a politician." "No, you're something better. You're someone who gets results. Think about it, Marcus. You've already proven you can outthink and outmaneuver people who seemed untouchable. Imagine what you could accomplish with actual authority." Before Marcus could respond, the bell rang, signaling the start of first period. "Just consider it," Sarah said as they gathered their things. "The school needs people like you in positions where they can make a real difference." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of stares, whispers, and awkward congratulations from classmates who'd barely acknowledged his existence a week earlier. By lunchtime, Marcus's head was spinning from the sudden shift in his social status. The cafeteria was the ultimate test. For 2 years, Marcus had navigated this space like a war zone, constantly alert for threats and escape routes. Now, as he entered with his lunch tray, the usual chaos seemed to organize itself around his presence. Students nodded respectfully as he passed. Several people invited him to sit at their tables. Most remarkably, the spot where Brad Morrison used to hold court was now occupied by a diverse group of students who'd previously been scattered across different social circles. Former outcasts, quiet achievers, and even a few reformed bullies, who seemed genuinely interested in changing their ways, chose a table near the windows where he could observe the room's dynamics. David joined him, along with Amy Walsh, a junior who'd been homeschooled until this year, specifically to avoid Jefferson High's toxic social environment. "It's weird, isn't it?" Amy said, picking at her sandwich. "How quickly everything changed." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "The whole atmosphere. Last week, this place felt like a prison. Today it feels like, I don't know, like a normal school where normal kids can just exist without constantly looking over their shoulders." She was right. The tension that had permeated Jefferson High for as long as Marcus could remember had lifted. Students were laughing more freely, sitting with people they actually liked rather than people they feared offending, and generally behaving like teenagers instead of prison inmates. "You did that," David said quietly. "By standing up to them. By proving they could be beaten, you gave everyone else permission to stop being afraid." Marcus looked around the cafeteria, really seeing it for the first time. Amy was right. The change was remarkable. But it also came with a weight of responsibility he hadn't anticipated. "Hey, Marcus." He turned to see Tyler Nash, one of Brad Morrison's former lieutenants, approaching their table. Marcus tensed instinctively, but Tyler's body language was submissive rather than threatening. "I just wanted to apologize," Tyler said, his voice barely audible over the cafeteria noise. "For everything. The way we treated you, the way we treated a lot of people, it was wrong." Marcus studied the boy's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden anger. But Tyler seemed genuinely remorseful, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked like shame. "Why now?" Marcus asked. "Because I saw what happened to Jake and Tommy. They're facing real consequences for the first time in their lives. And it made me think about all the stuff I did that should have had consequences too." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to be that person anymore." "Then don't be," Marcus said simply. "It's not that easy." People expect what you show them," Marcus interrupted. "If you show them someone different, they'll adapt their expectations." Tyler nodded slowly, processing this advice. "Thanks, and Marcus, what you did took real courage. I'm glad someone finally stood up to them." As Tyler walked away, Amy leaned closer to Marcus. "That's the 4th apology you've gotten today, isn't it?" "5th, Marcus corrected. "But who's counting?" "Everyone," David said. "Everyone's counting." Because this is the first time anyone's seen bullies actually face consequences at this school. You didn't just defend yourself, you changed the entire culture. Marcus was beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. By systematically documenting and exposing the violence that everyone had simply accepted as normal, he'd forced the administration, the police, and the student body to confront the reality of what Jefferson High had become. So what happens now? Amy asked, "Do you think things will actually stay different?" "That depends on whether people are willing to maintain the change," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "Defeating the bullies was just the first step. Making sure they don't come back is the real challenge." As if summoned by his words, Principal Hendricks appeared at their table, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Chun, could I speak with you privately?" Marcus followed the principal to a quiet corner of the cafeteria, noting how other students watched the interaction with intense interest. "I wanted to personally apologize," Principal Hendricks began, "for the school's failure to protect you from the harassment you endured. The investigation following Saturday's incident has revealed a pattern of administrative negligence that I find deeply troubling." "Thank you," Marcus said carefully. "I also wanted to inform you that we're implementing new anti-bullying protocols, including anonymous reporting systems and mandatory intervention procedures. Additionally, we're hiring a full-time counselor specifically to address social dynamics and conflict resolution." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Those sound like positive changes." "They are. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. What you did Saturday was extraordinarily dangerous. While I admire your courage and ingenuity, I can't condone students taking matters into their own hands to this extent. I understand. But I also hope you understand that students will continue taking matters into their own hands as long as the official channels fail to provide protection." Principal Hendricks winced at the pointed criticism but couldn't argue with its accuracy. "Fair point. Which is why I'm committed to ensuring those channels work properly going forward." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "There's something else. Sarah Martinez mentioned you might be interested in running for student government. She mentioned it. I think it's an excellent idea. Someone with your analytical skills and commitment to justice could make a real difference in student leadership." Marcus studied the principal's face, recognizing a politician's attempt to channel a potentially disruptive force into official channels. "I'll consider it," he said finally. "Good. And Marcus?" "Thank you. What you did was dangerous and could have gone very wrong, but it also exposed problems we needed to address. This school is going to be better because of your actions." As Principal Hendricks walked away, Marcus felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. In the span of a week, he'd gone from victim to hero to potential leader, and he wasn't entirely sure how he felt about any of it. 6 weeks later, Marcus sat in the Jefferson County Courthouse, watching as Chloe Vance's defense attorney made his closing argument to a jury that looked increasingly skeptical with each word. The trial had been expedited due to the overwhelming evidence and the defendant's status as minors, but the proceedings had been anything but quick. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Attorney Richard Blackwood said with practiced sincerity, "my client is a 17-year-old girl who made a mistake. A serious mistake, yes, but one born of teenage emotion and poor judgment, not criminal intent." Marcus suppressed a snort of disbelief. The evidence presented over the past 3 days had painted a clear picture of systematic bullying, careful planning, and deliberate intent to cause serious bodily harm. Chloe's teenage emotion defense rang hollow when confronted with the recording of her calmly discussing the need to maintain social order through violence. District Attorney Catherine Walsh rose for her rebuttal, her gray suit and stern expression conveying the gravity of the charges. She'd been personally handling the case, recognizing its potential to set important precedents about school violence and teen accountability. "Mr. Blackwood would have you believe this was a spontaneous act of teenage rebellion," Day Walsh began. her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd prosecuted hundreds of violent crimes. But the evidence tells a very different story. She moved to the prosecution's evidence table, where photos of the Vance mansion's floor plan were displayed, alongside transcript excerpts from Marcus's recording. This was a carefully orchestrated conspiracy involving multiple defendants, detailed planning, and explicit threats of violence designed to cause serious bodily harm. The defendant's own words, captured on audio recording, demonstrate clear premeditation and criminal intent. She played a brief excerpt from the recording, Chloe's voice filling the courtroom with chilling clarity. "You're going to learn what happens to people who challenge the system. And everyone else is going to watch you learn it." The jury's faces were grim as they listened to Chloe describe her plan to use violence to maintain social control. Several jurors glanced at the defendant's table, where Chloe sat between her parents, her usual confidence replaced by pale anxiety. "The defense wants you to see Miss Vance as a misguided teenager," Day Walsh continued. "But I ask you to consider what would have happened if Marcus Chun hadn't been prepared for their attack. What would have happened if a scared, isolated student had walked into that room without the tools and training necessary to protect himself?" She gestured toward Marcus, who sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table. The victim in this case showed remarkable restraint and intelligence under extreme pressure. He used only the force necessary to escape and document the crime, despite facing overwhelming odds and credible threats of serious violence. The defense attorney objected, claiming that Day was engaging in speculation about hypothetical outcomes, but Judge Harrison overruled him with a stern look. "The evidence in this case is clear," Day Walsh concluded. "Miss Vance organized a conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal intimidation. Her co-defendants willingly participated in this conspiracy, bringing weapons, their own physical strength, to what they knew would be a violent encounter with an unarmed victim." She paused, letting the weight of the charges settle over the courtroom. This was not teenage drama or schoolyard bullying. This was organized criminal violence designed to terrorize and control other students through fear. The defendants must be held accountable for their actions, and this community must send a clear message that such behavior will not be tolerated. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. On the charge of conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, the foreman read, "We find the defendant Chloe Marie Vance guilty." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and vindication as the verdicts continued. Guilty of false imprisonment. Guilty of criminal intimidation. Guilty on charges that would follow them into adulthood, affecting college applications, job prospects, and their ability to simply move on from their actions. Jake Brennan received the harshest sentence. 2 years in juvenile detention followed by 3 years of supervised probation. His history of violence and his role as the intended primary attacker worked against him during sentencing. Tommy Rodriguez and the football players received 18 months of detention and probation. Their cooperation during the investigation and genuine expressions of remorse influenced the judge's decision. Chloe, despite being the ringleader, received a relatively lighter sentence due to her age, lack of prior convictions, and her family's ability to afford excellent legal representation. 12 months in juvenile detention, followed by community service and mandatory counseling. But the real victory wasn't the sentences, it was the precedent. For the first time in Jefferson County's history, student bullying had been prosecuted as the serious criminal behavior actually was. "How do you feel?" Dr. Chun asked as they left the courthouse. Marcus considered the question carefully. "Satisfied, I think. Justice was served, but more importantly, other kids won't have to go through what I went through." "Any regrets?" "Only that it took so long for adults to take this seriously. How many other students suffered because everyone treated systematic violence as boys being boys, or teenage drama?" Dr. Chun nodded thoughtfully. Change often requires someone willing to stand up and demand better. You were that someone. As they drove home, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that day in the cafeteria when he'd first fought back against Brad Morrison. The scared, isolated teenager who'd lived in constant fear of harassment was gone, replaced by someone who understood that strength came not from muscle or intimidation, but from intelligence, preparation, and the courage to do what was right. "I still can't believe you're actually doing this," David said, adjusting Marcus's tie for the third time. They stood backstage in Jefferson High's auditorium, where the student government debate was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. "Honestly, neither can I," Marcus admitted, reviewing his note cards one final time. His speech was carefully crafted to address the issues that mattered most to students while avoiding the political grandstanding that typically characterized these events. The past month had been a whirlwind of campaigning, meet and greets, and policy discussions that Marcus never could have imagined participating in before his transformation from victim to leader. Sarah Martinez had been right. His reputation as someone who could identify problems and create solutions had resonated with students who were tired of ineffective, symbolic leadership. 5 minutes candidates, called Mrs. Peterson, the faculty advisor for student government. Through the curtain, Marcus could hear the auditorium filling with students, teachers, and parents. The turnout was reportedly the largest in Jefferson High's history, drawn by curiosity about the boy who'd taken down the school's most powerful bullying network and interest in whether he could translate that success into broader change. His opponent was Jessica Chen, no relation. Despite the shared surname, charismatic senior who'd been groomed for leadership roles since freshman year. She represented the traditional student government approach, spirit weeks, dance planning, and feel-good initiatives that looked impressive on college applications, but rarely addressed substantive issues. "Marcus," Sarah appeared beside him, her expression serious. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I can be," he replied. "Though I still think you should be running instead of me. I'm term limited," she reminded him. "Besides, you're exactly what this school needs right now. Someone who understands that real leadership means tackling difficult problems, not just organizing pep rallies." The curtain rose, revealing an auditorium packed beyond capacity. Marcus took his place at the podium on the left side of the stage, noting the mix of curiosity, skepticism, and genuine interest in the faces looking back at him. Principal Hendricks stepped to the center microphone to introduce the candidates and explain the format. Each candidate would give a 5-minute opening statement, followed by questions from a student panel, and concluding with 2-minute closing arguments. Jessica spoke first, delivering a polished presentation about school spirit, tradition, and unity. Her speech was well-rehearsed and professionally coached, hitting all the expected themes about bringing students together and maintaining Jefferson High's proud legacy. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stepped to the microphone, adjusted his glasses, and looked out at the audience. For a moment, he was transported back to that day in the cafeteria when he'd first found the courage to stand up for himself. The same calm certainty that had guided him then settled over him now. 6 months ago, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. "I was afraid to eat lunch at this school. I was afraid to walk down certain hallways, afraid to use certain bathrooms, afraid to be alone in spaces where I might become a target for violence." The auditorium was completely silent, students and adults alike focused intently on his words. "I wasn't afraid because I was weak or cowardly. I was afraid because this school had a culture that permitted and even encouraged systematic harassment of students who didn't fit into narrow social categories. I was afraid because when I reported incidents to administrators, I was told that boys will be boys and that I needed to toughen up." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "That culture nearly destroyed my education, my self-confidence, and my faith in institutions designed to protect students. But it also taught me something important. that real change requires people willing to identify problems clearly and work systematically to solve them. Marcus gestured toward the audience, making eye contact with students throughout the auditorium. Today, this school is different. Not because bullying has been eliminated, that would be naive, but because we've established that systematic harassment will have real consequences. Not because every social problem has been solved, but because we've proven that students can work together to demand better from the adults responsible for our safety and education. The energy in the room was shifting, students sitting up straighter and paying closer attention. If elected, I won't promise you better dances or more school spirit. What I will promise is systematic identification of problems that affect student welfare and evidence-based solutions designed to address those problems effectively. He outlined his platform: expanded mental health resources, anonymous reporting systems for harassment, academic support programs for struggling students, and meaningful student input in policy decisions that affected their daily lives. Change is difficult and often uncomfortable, Marcus concluded. It requires admitting that current systems aren't working and committing to the hard work of building something better. But the alternative, accepting dysfunction as normal, is unacceptable. The applause that followed was different from the polite response Jessica had received. It was enthusiastic, sustained, and came from across the social spectrum of students who'd rarely agreed on anything. The question and answer session revealed the fundamental difference between the candidates. Jessica provided diplomatic answers that avoided controversy and maintained the status quo. Marcus offered specific, detailed solutions to concrete problems, demonstrating the analytical thinking that had made him famous. When asked about school safety, Jessica talked about the importance of reporting concerns to trusted adults. Marcus outlined a comprehensive anti-bullying protocol he developed with input from counselors, law enforcement, and student focus groups. When questioned about academic pressure, Jessica suggested stress reduction activities and study groups. Marcus proposed restructuring homework policies, expanding college counseling resources, and creating pathways for students who weren't college-bound to receive meaningful career preparation. The contrast was stark and increasingly obvious to everyone in the auditorium. Jessica was offering feel-good platitudes. Marcus was providing actionable solutions. "Final question," announced the student moderator, a junior named Alex Rodriguez. "What makes you qualified to represent the diverse student body of Jefferson?" "Hi?" Jessica's answer focused on her extensive involvement in student activities and her ability to work with different groups. It was a safe, predictable response that emphasized her resume over her vision. Marcus approached the microphone with quiet confidence. 6 months ago, I would have said I wasn't qualified to represent anyone. I was isolated, afraid, and convinced that my voice didn't matter. But I learned something important when I finally stood up for myself. Everyone's voice matters, especially those who have been silenced by fear or intimidation. He gestured toward different sections of the auditorium. "I've been the kid who ate lunch alone. I've been the target of systematic harassment. I've been dismissed by adults who should have protected me. But I've also learned what it means to find courage when everything seems hopeless, to use intelligence and preparation to overcome seemingly impossible odds, and to turn personal pain into positive change for others." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "I'm qualified to represent you because I understand what it feels like to be powerless. And I've learned how to transform that powerlessness into effective action. I'm qualified because I've proven that one person with a clear plan and the courage to execute it can change systems that seemed untouchable." The applause was immediate and overwhelming. Students throughout the auditorium rose to their feet, creating a sustained ovation that went on for nearly 2 minutes. As the applause finally died down, Marcus delivered his closing statement. "This election isn't about popularity or tradition. It's about whether we want student government that looks good on college applications or student government that actually improves students' lives. It's about whether we're satisfied with symbolic leadership or demand functional leadership. He paused, making eye contact with as many students as possible. I'm not asking for your vote because I'm the most popular candidate or because I'll organize the best dances. I'm asking for your vote because I've demonstrated the ability to identify problems, develop solutions, and achieve results that make a real difference in students' lives. The election results were announced the following Friday during lunch. Marcus won with 73% of the vote, the largest margin in Jefferson High's history. More significantly, voter turnout reached 89%, nearly double the previous record. I still can't believe it, David said as they walked through hallways that felt fundamentally different from the threatening maze Marcus had navigated just months earlier. You went from cafeteria victim to vice president. It's not about the title, Marcus replied, though he couldn't suppress a sense of satisfaction at the outcome. It's about having a platform to continue the work we started. Sarah Martinez appeared beside them, her expression beaming with pride. Congratulations, Mr. Vice President, she said formally, then broke into a grin. Seriously, Marcus, that was the most impressive campaign I've ever seen. You didn't just win, you changed what students expect from their leadership. Now comes the hard part, Marcus said. Actually delivering on the promises. You will, Sarah said confidently. You've already proven you can turn plans into results. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the same cafeteria where his transformation had begun, but the space was virtually unrecognizable. Gone were the rigid social hierarchies and territories controlled by different cliques. Students sat in mixed groups, based on shared interests rather than social status. Laughter was genuine rather than cruel. The atmosphere was relaxed, comfortable, and safe. The bullying incident reports are down 89% from last year, Amy Walsh said, reviewing the data on her tablet. As Marcus's appointed Secretary of Student Welfare, she'd become an expert in analyzing the metrics that measured Jefferson High's cultural transformation. Anonymous tip reports are up 340%, added David, who'd been elected Secretary of Communications, and had revolutionized how students could report problems and suggest improvements. And perhaps most importantly, said Dr. Lisa Sheen, Marcus's mother, who joined the school board after the trial made national news, student suicide ideation reports are down 67%, and academic performance across all demographics is up significantly. They stood in the administrative office that had been converted into the student government working space, reviewing the first-year report on the reforms Marcus had implemented. The changes had been systematic, comprehensive, and remarkably effective. Anonymous reporting system had evolved into a sophisticated, early intervention network that identified problems before they escalated into violence. The peer mediation program had trained over 100 students in conflict resolution techniques. The Academic Support Initiative had eliminated the grade-based social hierarchies that had contributed to bullying behavior. Most importantly, the entire school culture had shifted from one that tolerated cruelty to one that actively promoted inclusion and mutual respect. The State Department of Education wants to use our model as a template for anti-bullying programs statewide, Principal Hendricks announced, entering the office with a stack of documents. Marcus, you've been invited to present your findings to the governor's task force on school safety. Marcus accepted the invitation with characteristic calm, though internally he marveled at how far he'd traveled from the scared boy who'd once dreaded coming to school. There's something else, Principal Hendricks continued. Brad Morrison's parents have requested a meeting. They want to apologize and discuss his potential return to Jefferson next fall. The request surprised Marcus. Brad had been expelled after his arm healed and he'd been released from juvenile detention. His family had moved to another district, and Marcus hadn't thought about his former tormentor in months. What do you think? Amy asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. I think people deserve the opportunity to change, but they also Need to demonstrate genuine commitment to that change. Very diplomatic, David observed. But are you okay with him coming back? I'm not the same person who is afraid of Brad Morrison, Marcus replied honestly. And if he's genuinely changed, then this school is better equipped to help him succeed than wherever he's been. The meeting with the Morrison family took place the following week in Principal Hendricks's office. Brad entered looking dramatically different from the swaggering bully Marcus remembered. He was thinner, quieter, and carried himself with something that might have been humility. "Marcus," Brad said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Several apologies, actually. He'd clearly prepared remarks, but his delivery was genuine rather than rehearsed. "What I did to you, what I did to other students was wrong. I used my size and strength to hurt people who couldn't fight back, and I convinced myself that was normal because nobody stopped me." Marcus studied Brad's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But the boys sitting across from him seemed genuinely remorseful. "I spent 8 months in detention thinking about why I did those things," Brad continued. "And the truth is, I was angry and scared, and I took it out on people who seemed even more scared than I was." "What changed?" Marcus asked. "Meeting other kids who'd done the same things I did, and seeing how pathetic we all looked when we couldn't hide behind intimidation anymore." Brad's smile was self-deprecating. "Turns out bullies are just afraid of people who haven't learned better coping mechanisms." The conversation continued for another hour, with Brad answering questions about his rehabilitation, his understanding of the harm he'd caused, and his plans for making amends. By the end, Marcus was convinced that Brad's transformation was genuine. "I think he deserves a second chance," Marcus told Principal Hendricks after the Morrison family left. "But with clear conditions and ongoing monitoring." "Agreed. We'll develop a probationary re-enrollment plan that includes counseling, community service, and regular check-ins with the student mediation team." As the school year drew to a close, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The scared, isolated boy who'd once counted the minutes until he could escape Jefferson High had become someone who looked forward to coming to school each day. "Any regrets?" his father asked one evening as they reviewed college application essays in Dr. Chun's study. "About standing up to the bullies?" "No," Marcus replied without hesitation. "About how it escalated? Sometimes. I wish it could have been resolved without anyone getting hurt. Even people who were trying to hurt you. Especially people who were trying to hurt me. Hurt people, as the counselors say. Breaking the cycle benefits everyone." Dr. Chun smiled with obvious pride. "You've become a remarkable young man, Marcus. Not just intelligent and capable, but wise and compassionate." "I had good teachers," Marcus replied, gesturing around the study where his father had taught him anatomy, physics, and the importance of understanding systems before trying to change them. The final achievement of Marcus's vice presidency came at graduation. Jefferson High's class of 2025 had the highest graduation rate in school history, the lowest disciplinary incident rate, and the most diverse college acceptance statistics ever recorded. But the moment that meant the most to Marcus came during the ceremony itself. As he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, the entire auditorium erupted in sustained applause, not just from his fellow students, but from parents, teachers, and community members who recognized that his transformation of Jefferson High had created a model for schools nationwide. In the audience, he spotted familiar faces: Amy Walsh, who'd been accepted to Harvard for psychology; David Kim, heading to MIT for computer science; Sarah Martinez, who'd received a full scholarship to study political science at Stanford. Even Brad Morrison was there, having successfully completed his probationary year and earned his diploma alongside his former victims. As Marcus accepted his diploma from Principal Hendricks, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. From victim to survivor, to leader to catalyst for systemic change, each step had required courage, intelligence, and the willingness to believe that individual action could create collective transformation. "Thank you," Principal Hendricks said quietly as he handed Marcus the diploma, "for everything you've done for the school and these students." Marcus smiled, looking out at the auditorium, full of people whose lives had been touched by the changes they'd implemented together. "Thank you for believing that change was possible," he replied as he walked off the stage and into his future. Marcus knew that the lessons he'd learned at Jefferson High about courage, systemic thinking, and the power of turning personal pain into positive change would serve him well whatever challenges lay ahead. The scared boy who'd once dreaded each school day was gone, replaced by a young man who understood that strength came not from the ability to overpower others, but from the wisdom to transform conflict into opportunity and fear into hope. Behind him, Jefferson High continued its transformation, each new class of students inheriting a culture of respect and inclusion that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. The changes Marcus had initiated would outlast his time at the school, creating a legacy that would protect and empower students for generations to come. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all, proving that one person with courage, intelligence, and determination could create change that rippled far beyond their individual circumstances, transforming not just their own life, but the lives of countless others who would follow in their footsteps. What did you think of this thrilling journey? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest tales. What kind of story would you like to hear next?